Poor Lumberjack married Fat Zulu for a horse. On wedding night she locked the door. "You bought me," she said, voice low and steady. "So you will not touch what you did not earn." Elias Holt stood with his hand on the latch and felt the door go heavy beneath his palm. The bolt slid home from the other side with a clean, final clack. He heard the scrape of wood, the steady breath of a woman who did not tremble. Outside the cabin, the camp went on like nothing holy had just been broken. Men laughed near the cookhouse. A saw bit into frozen spruce somewhere down the slope. The wind pushed dry snow against the chinking, whispering through the cracks like a warning. Elias looked at the rough plank door as if it had spoken. He had worn his best red flannel for the wedding, cleaned his beard with snowmelt and pine soap, pulled his hair back with a strip of twine so he looked like a man who could keep a vow. Now he stood barefoot on the cabin's cold boards, socks damp from the walk, feeling like a thief turned away from his own stolen goods. He swallowed once hard. "No Kuthela," he said through the wood. I ain't here to hurt you." Pause. The soft sound of a blanket being laid out. The whisper of beads, faint as sleet. "You are here because you needed a horse," she replied. "And because men talked your name into a corner." His jaw tightened. He could still hear them in the saloon 2 nights back. The smirk in McCready's face. The way the lantern light made every lie shine. No horse. No hauling. No winter wages. No respect. A man without a team was half a man on this frontier, and Elias had been limping on half a man for months. His last gelding had gone down in the logging road, tendons snapped on black ice. Elias had shot at himself behind the barn, then sat in the snow until his hands turned numb and he stopped shaking. He had told himself he would rebuild. He had told himself he would not borrow. He had told himself pride was something a man could eat. Then the trader came through town with a stout bay mare and a bargain attached to it like a lead weight. Marry the Zulu woman. Take the horse. Pay in vows. Elias had laughed at first. Then he saw the mare, strong-legged and bright-eyed, steam rising from her nostrils like a promise. He saw the ledger in the trader's hand. The winter ahead. The empty stall. He saw his own hunger. So he said yes. He had not asked where she'd come from. Not properly. He had heard scraps. A ship. A mission. A quarrel. A woman moved north like freight, passed from hand to hand until she landed in this timber town that smelled of wet bark and cheap whiskey. At the courthouse, she stood straight in her traditional Zulu clothing, beadwork bright against the gray day, skin dark as oiled wood. She was broad-shouldered and full-bodied, not delicate, not small. Her presence took up space the way a hearth took up space, like warmth could be demanded by sheer will. Men stared like they had paid for the right. She didn't drop her eyes once. When the clerk asked her name, she said it like a blade being laid on a table. No Kuthela. When the clerk asked if she took Elias Holt as husband, she paused long enough for the room to feel its own ugliness, then answered. Yes. Not soft. Not sweet. A yes that sounded like a door closing. Now the door was closed for real, and Elias felt the same helplessness he'd felt behind the barn with his pistol shaking. He leaned his forehead to the wood. The grain was rough, catching at his skin. Let me at least put more wood in the stove, he said. Night's coming hard. You may bring wood, she answered. And then you will sleep where you are. He exhaled a thin breath that fogged the crack beneath the door. All right, he said. All right. He stepped away and pulled on his boots, laces stiff with frost. His cabin was a 2-room box, half sunk into the earth, roof heavy with snow. He had built it himself when his shoulders were younger and his heart less tired. Now it felt like someone else's place. He went out into the small yard, the air biting his cheeks raw. The moon had risen pale behind cloud, turning the world into a sheet of hammered tin. He stacked split birch under his arm until his ribs complained. The mare stood in the lean-to, shifting her weight, ears forward. She watched him with calm judgment. That's the price, he muttered, more to himself than the horse. Ain't it? She blew warm breath, and it drifted like smoke into the night. He carried the wood to the cabin and set it by the stove in the front room. The stove glowed dull red. The smell of iron and ash filled his nose. From behind the door to the back room, he heard the quiet movements of no Kuthela settling. No crying. No pleading. Just the steady, purposeful sounds of a person claiming ground. Elias sat on the bench near the stove and rubbed his hands together until the skin stung. He tried to picture the moment he'd agreed. Tried to find the point where he could have turned away. He had seen the trader's grin. She's a woman, the trader had said. She'll do what a husband tells her. Elias had felt something sour rise in his chest then. He had told himself he was not like that. He had told himself he would give her a roof, food, a name that kept wolves from her door. He had not told himself he would love her. He had not told himself he would want her. But on the walk from the courthouse, with her beside him in the snow, her steps sure and quiet, he had felt his own loneliness flare like a wound. He had wanted to speak, to ask, to understand. He had not known how. At the cabin, when he reached for the latch, she had spoken without turning. "We will make rules," she said. He blinked, caught off guard. "Rules?" She faced him then. Her eyes were dark and hard as river stones. "You will not treat me like a cow you traded for," she said. "You will not drink and stumble into my bed. You will not bring men to look at me. You will not speak my name like a joke." Elias had swallowed. "I never—" "You did," she cut in. "When you said yes for the horse." He had flinched at that because it was true. Now in the front room, he stared at the stove's small window and watched the fire breathe. He could still hear the camp's laughter through the night, distant and thin. Men who would say he had done it. Men who would ask what it was like. Men who would want him to prove he was still a man. His fists clenched. He stood and went to the small wash basin, splashed cold water on his face. The water stung like needles. He wiped his beard with a rag and sat back down. Silence settled heavier. He spoke again, softer. "No Kuthela." No answer. He waited. The stove popped, shifting. The wind pressed snow against the roof. "I don't know what you've been through," he said. "I ain't pretending I do. But I won't force you. I won't." A long pause came. Then her voice, calm as ever. Men always say that first. The words landed with the weight of a log dropped wrong. Elias felt heat crawl up his neck, not anger, shame. He stared at his hands, cracked and scarred from saw teeth and rope burns. "What do you want then?" he asked. "Tonight. Tomorrow. This winter." Behind the door he heard her shift. The faint jingle of beads again. "I want to be safe," she said. "Safe is not your words. Safe is what you do when you are angry. Safe is what you do when the men laugh." He nodded even though she couldn't see. "All right," he said. "I can do that." "You can try," she replied. Elias lay down on the floor with a blanket under him and another over him. The boards pressed hard into his shoulder. His breath rose white in the dim. The fire sank lower. He listened to the cabin. To the tiny sounds that told him someone else was alive in the back room. To the steady, controlled breathing that did not invite him in. He had expected, if he was honest, some kind of softness to make the bargain feel less ugly. He had expected fear. Compliance. Something that would let him pretend. Instead he had been given truth and a locked door. It made him feel small. It made him feel seen. Sleep came in scraps, broken by dreams of ice roads and the crack of a gun. Each time he woke, the cabin was darker, the fire lower. Each time he heard her breathing and it steadied him more than the whiskey ever had. Before dawn, he rose quietly and fed the stove until it caught again. Warmth crept back into the room. He pulled on his red flannel and went outside into the iron-cold morning. The sky was a bruised gray. The pines stood stiff, heavy with snow. The camp lay down the slope like a scatter of dark teeth. He went to the lean-to and looked at the mare. She nickered once, soft. Elias reached out and touched her neck. The hair was coarse, warm under his glove. He leaned his forehead against her and closed his eyes. "Bought you with a sin," he whispered. "Now I gotta live with it." Hoofbeats crunched nearby. A figure came out of the trees, lantern swinging. "McCready." Thick coat, thin smile. "Well?" McCready called. "How's married life, Holt?" Elias straightened slowly, hands still on the mare. McCready's eyes flicked past him to the cabin, hungry for stories. Elias felt the old urge rise. To laugh. To brag. To give them what they wanted so they'd stop circling. Then he remembered Nokuthala's words. "Safe is what you do when the men laugh." Elias kept his voice flat. "None of your business." McCready's grin widened like a knife edge. "Ah, come on. Don't be shy. Whole town's talkin'. You trade your pride for a horse and now you got yourself a—" Elias moved before he thought. 2 steps, fast and hard, closing the gap. He grabbed McCready by the coat front and shoved him back against the lean-to post. Snow fell off the beam in a dusty sheet. McCready's lantern swung wildly, throwing light across Elias's beard and the red flannel like blood. "You say her name wrong," Elias hissed. "I'll break your teeth so you can't say any name." McCready blinked, surprise cracking his swagger. "You serious?" he sputtered. Elias held him there, close enough to smell the sour whiskey in his breath. Close enough to feel the man's pulse jumping under cheap wool. "I'm serious," Elias said. And if any man comes sniffing around my cabin, I'll treat him the same. He released Macready with a shove. Macready stumbled, caught himself, face twisted between anger and fear. He tried to laugh but it came out thin. You're whipped already? Elias didn't answer. He turned back to the mare and began fitting the harness, hands steady. Macready stood a moment longer, then spat into the snow and walked away, boots crunching hard, lantern bobbing like a retreating will-o-wisp. Elias finished harnessing the mare and led her toward the road. When he looked back at the cabin, he saw the door crack open a finger's width. Just enough for an eye to watch. Nokuthala's gaze met his across the yard. No smile. No thanks. Only a measuring look like a person reading weather. Elias nodded once, small. He lifted 2 fingers to his brow, not a salute, just an acknowledgement. The door closed again, softer this time, not a bolt slammed but a choice. He walked the mare down toward the logging road, breath smoking, shoulders braced. Men would talk. They would press. Winter would get colder. Wages would get meaner. The horse would pull, and his hands would bleed, and the camp would test him in ways he hadn't imagined. But the locked door had done something to him. It had stripped the lie off the bargain and left only the work. And Elias Holt, for all his flaws, knew how to work. By noon the saws screamed in the cut. Frost clung to beards and brows. The mare leaned into her collar and hauled a load of pine like she had been born for it. Elias walked beside her, boots slipping on packed snow, breath burning his lungs. Men watched him with sideways eyes. New team, someone muttered. New wife, another answered, and there was laughter that tried to find his skin. Elias kept his gaze forward. He held the line steady. He spoke to the mare under his breath, calm words, low and constant. At the landing, the foreman, a hard man named Rusk, stepped close. Heard you made a trade, Rusk said, eyes narrowed. Hope the horse is worth the trouble. Elias tightened the strap on the harness. She's worth the work. Rusk grunted, not sure what to do with that. As the day dragged on, Elias felt something unfamiliar settle in him. Not ease. Not joy. Something like purpose cut sharp by shame. When dusk came, he led the mare back up the hill. The sky turned the color of old steel. Smoke rose from chimneys in thin blue lines. His cabin waited, dark except for a faint glow in the window. He paused at the door and wiped his boots on the log step. He took off his cap and held it in his hands a moment like a man approaching a church. Inside, the front room smelled of stew and wood smoke. A pot simmered on the stove. A blanket was folded neatly on the bench, like it had been prepared for him. Nokuthala stood near the table, her beadwork catching firelight. Her posture was straight, shoulders strong, face unreadable. Elias stopped just inside. Evening. She looked at him. Her eyes went to his hands, then to his face, then past him as if listening for footsteps that were not there. You fought, she said. He blinked. Word travels fast. In this town it runs, she replied. Did you win? Elias hesitated. He remembered Macready's startled eyes, the way power could feel like righteousness if you weren't careful. I didn't break him, Elias said. But I meant what I said. Nokuthala studied him a long moment. Then, without a word, she reached out and slid something across the table toward him. A small bundle of cloth. Inside, his old pocket knife sharpened. His mittens patched. A strip of clean rag for bandaging. Prepared. Quiet. Practical. His throat tightened. I made food, she said. Eat. Elias sat slowly like a man afraid the chair might vanish. He took the bowl she set before him. The stew was thick with potatoes and scraps of salt pork, warmed through with onions. He tasted it and felt heat spread into places the cold had owned all day. You didn't have to, he murmured. She sat across from him, hands folded. I did not do it for you, she said. I did it because winter is a beast. 2 people can hold a door better than one. Elias nodded. That's true. They ate in silence for a while, the only sound the stove's low roar and the spoon against tin. After he finished, Elias set the bowl down carefully. I won't ask for the door tonight, he said. Nokuthala's gaze lifted sharp. You want it. He held her eyes. Want ain't the same as taking. Something flickered in her expression then. Not softness. Not surrender. Something like respect, thin and cautious. She stood and walked to the back room door. Her hand rested on the latch. She did not open it. You will sleep here again, she said. But the bolt will not be slammed. Elias let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. All right, he said. Nokuthala paused, then looked back at him. You will tell me, she said, voice steady, how you lost your horse. Elias stared at the firelight on the wall, at the shadows of their bodies stretching and thinning. He swallowed once, feeling the old grief rise like smoke. "I shot him," he said. "With my own hands." Nokuthala's face did not change, but her eyes did. "Then you know," she said quietly, "what it is to end what you loved because you had no choice." Elias's mouth went dry. "I didn't love that horse like." "Loss is loss," she cut in, not cruel, just certain. "Do not measure it to escape it." He nodded slow. Outside, the wind picked up, tapping the window with ice grains. The cabin held, small and stubborn against the wild. Elias lay down on his blanket, the same hard boards, the same fire breathing low. But the air felt different now. Behind the back room door, he heard Nokuthala move, the soft rustle of cloth, the faint clink of beads. He imagined her sitting on the edge of the bed, listening to the world the way a hunter listens. He closed his eyes. In the dark he could not see the bolt. He could only feel the space between them, not empty, not closed, but waiting, like a trail buried under snow that might be walked when the thaw came. And for the first time since the bargain, Elias Holt let himself think a dangerous thought. Maybe the horse was not the only thing he had traded for. Maybe the horse was not the only thing he had traded for. Morning came like a hand slapped across his face. The stove had died down to coals, and the cold had crept back in, finding every seam in the cabin. Elias woke with his jaw clenched and his fingers curled tight under the blanket. He sat up slowly, listening. No voices outside yet. No boots on the step. Only wind and the far-off groan of trees settling under frost. From the back room a soft sound. Nokuthala cleared her throat once, controlled, like a signal that she was awake and alive and not going anywhere. Elias rose and fed the stove without a word. The iron took the new wood with a reluctant hiss. Flames caught, small and stubborn. He washed his face in cold water. The shock made his eyes water. When he looked up, he saw himself in the cracked mirror above the basin, beard rough, cheeks red from wind, red flannel hanging on him like a flag he wasn't sure he deserved. He turned as the back room door opened. Nokuthala stepped out, her traditional Zulu clothing neat even in the dim. Beadwork sat at her neck and along her arms. She carried herself the way a man carried an axe, balanced, ready, not decorative. She looked at the stove, then at the woodpile. "You rose early," she said. "I always do," Elias answered. "Camp don't wait." She nodded once, and for a moment the cabin felt like it had two people in it instead of two strangers sharing air. Elias reached for his coat. His hand hovered over the hook where his hat hung. "You asked about my horse," he said, voice low. "Why?" Nokuthala's gaze stayed on him. "Because men lie about what they have lost," she replied. "They dress it up. They make it someone else's fault. I want to know if you can speak plain." Elias took that in like a blow that didn't bruise. "It was my fault," he said. "I drove him too hard on bad ice. He trusted me. Then his leg went wrong and I finished it." Nokuthala's eyes did not soften, but they stopped cutting. "Plain?" she said. He nodded. "Plain." They ate what stew remained, warmed with a little water. Nokuthala ate steady, not hurried, like a person who knew hunger but refused to be ruled by it. After, Elias pulled on his boots and stepped toward the door. "Nokuthala," he said. She paused, watching him. "I told the men to mind their tongues," he said. "They will try anyway." "They always try," she replied. Elias hesitated. "If any come here." She lifted a hand, palm out, not to stop him but to set a boundary. "This cabin is your work," she said. "My body is not your work. Do you understand the difference?" Elias felt his face heat. "Yes," he said. "Good," she replied. "Then go do the labor you know." Elias stepped out into the cold. The day hit him hard. Snow creaked underfoot like old leather. The sky was a hard, pale lid. He led the mare down the slope, harness jingling quiet, breath smoking from both their mouths. At camp, the men looked up as he came in. A few stared openly. A few smirked. McCready stood near the saw shed, jaw still swollen with pride more than pain, eyes like a dog that had been kicked and now wanted to bite. Elias didn't give him room. He tied the mare with practiced hands and went straight to his job. The logging road needed clearing. The sled runners needed packing. The foreman didn't care about weddings, only weight moved and time kept. The work took him the way it always did, swallowing thought with rhythm. Axe breath shoulder. Rope heel haul. The smell of pitch and sweat rose even in the cold. By midday, a small mishap turned into a warning. A young choker setter named Lyle slipped near the landing and nearly got dragged under a rolling log. Elias lunged and grabbed him by the coat back, yanking him clear as the log thudded past, close enough to brush their knees. Lyle sat in the snow, shaking, eyes wide. Watch your feet, Elias snapped, more fear than anger. This place will eat you fast if you let it. Lyle nodded hard, swallowing. Rusk saw it and gave Elias a long look, the kind that measured a man without words. You got quick hands, Rusk grunted. Had to, Elias replied. Rusk spat into the snow. Quick hands don't keep a camp from talk. Elias kept his eyes on the log pile. Then maybe the camp should talk less. Rusk's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Maybe. But by afternoon the talk found its way anyway. When Elias went to the cookhouse for a mug of coffee, he heard it before he saw it. She locked him out, a man whispered, laughter in his voice. Must be a mean sow, another replied. Or he ain't man enough, came the third, and that one stung worse because it wasn't about her. It was about him. Elias stepped into the doorway. The room quieted in the way a room quiets when someone dangerous walks in. He did not raise his voice. He did not swing his fist. He simply looked at each man in turn, letting his stare rest long enough to feel uncomfortable. You talk about my wife, he said plain. You talk about your teeth. One man snorted. Your wife. Elias felt the word catch. Wife. It was paper and ink and a courthouse clerk. It was not warmth. It was not closeness. It was a locked door and rules. Still he kept his voice steady. Mine, he said. And you'll show respect. They watched him as if waiting for the joke. When none came they shifted, uneasy. A few looked away. McCready leaned back against the wall, trying to look bored. You gettin' real righteous, McCready said. What she got you doing? Sleeping on the floor like a dog? Elias's muscles tightened. He could feel the urge to rush him again to prove something simple and brutal. Then he remembered Nokuthala's words again. Safe is what you do when you are angry. Elias took a step closer, slow and controlled. You want to know where I sleep? Elias said, voice low. You must be lonely. A few men chuckled, surprised. McCready's face reddened. I ain't. Elias cut him off. You ain't nothing to me, he said. Now drink your coffee and keep your mouth shut. He turned and left without waiting. Outside, the cold air hit his lungs like clean punishment. He walked back to the landing with the mare's reins in his hand and the camp's eyes on his back. He worked until dark. His shoulders burned. His palms split under the rope. The mare pulled steady, never balking, as if she understood labor better than any man. When he finally led her home, snow had started again, fine and persistent, filling the tracks behind them like the world wanted to erase everything. The cabin window glowed. Elias paused at the step, brushed snow from his hat and knocked once. Not because he feared the door. Because he was learning. Inside, Nokuthala answered with her voice, not her hands. Come, she said. Elias stepped in. Warmth wrapped him like a blanket. The stove was fed. A pot simmered. The smell was better tonight, with herbs he didn't recognize, sharp and earthy. Nokuthala stood by the table, sleeves and beads catching the firelight. You are late, she said, not accusing, only noting. Hauling ran long, he replied. He glanced at her hands. You found herbs? I know plants, she said simply. Even here. Elias hung his coat. He felt the ache in his bones settle into the floor. He sat and took the bowl she offered. They ate again in near silence. But silence wasn't empty now. It had shape. It had room for things to happen without being forced. After they ate, Nokuthala poured hot water into a basin and set it on the table. Hands, she said. Elias blinked. What? She nodded at his palms. The rope burns were raw, oozing. He hadn't wanted to look at them too closely. You will get infection, she said. Then you will be useless. Then the men will laugh more. Elias swallowed and held out his hands, palms up, like a man surrendering. Nokuthala took his hands without flinching. Her touch was firm, not tender. She washed the wounds with cloth and hot water. The sting made Elias suck in a breath. You do not cry, she observed. I ain't crying, he muttered. Her mouth twitched. Your eyes disagree. Elias let out a short, surprised sound that might have been a laugh if it had more room in him. She dabbed the cuts with something that smelled bitter. Then she wrapped them with clean rag, tight enough to hold, not tight enough to hurt. Her fingers were strong. They did not hesitate. When she finished, she released him as if she had simply finished a task. Elias flexed his hands. Thank you, he said. Nokuthala sat back, watching him. Do not thank me like I am a servant, she replied. I do not do this because you are master. Elias nodded quickly. I know. Why did you do it? She asked. Elias frowned. Do what? Fight their talk, Nokuthula said. Men talk because it gives them heat. You could have let it pass. Elias stared at the wrapped wounds on his hands. He thought of Macready's grin, of the cookhouse laughter, of the way eyes lingered on Nokuthula in the courthouse. He spoke slowly. Because I let it happen once, he said. I let the bargain happen. I let them think they could buy you through me. If I don't stop it, then I'm part of it. Nokuthula studied him for a long moment, as if tasting his words for poison. Then she nodded once. Better, she said. Elias leaned back tired. The fire snapped. Nokuthula rose and walked to the back room door. She rested her hand on the latch again, the same measured pause as the night before. You want to speak more, she said. Elias hesitated. I don't want to pry. You want to know why I am here, she said. Elias's throat tightened. Yes. Nokuthula opened the door and stepped into the back room. She did not close it. Elias felt a quiet shock. He stayed where he was, not moving, as if a sudden movement might ruin it. Nokuthula's voice came from within, not hidden, not offered to him as comfort, just stated. I was taken from home, she said. Not by chains like you imagine. By promises. By paper. By men who said work and shelter and God's words would protect me. Elias listened, breath shallow. They put me on a ship, she continued. I crossed water until the world was only wood and sickness and prayer. Men looked at me as if I was a thing to be owned, even when they spoke kindness. Elias swallowed. His hands tightened, wrapped and clumsy. When I arrived, I was passed to a mission, Nokuthula said. They made me work. They told me what words to say. They told me to hide my language, to hide my name. They said it was for my good. Her voice did not shake. That steadiness hurt more than tears would have. One man tried to take more than my labor, she said. I broke his nose with a kettle. Elias's eyes widened. They said I was savage, Nokuthula went on. They said I was ungrateful. They sold me away from the mission to a trader who did not want trouble. Elias felt the chain of it, link after link, and his stomach turned. And then, she said, voice colder, the trader found men here who would trade a horse for a woman. Elias flinched. The truth was a knife and he could not pretend it wasn't sharp. Nokuthula stepped back into the front room. The back room door remained open behind her, a dark rectangle that felt like an invitation and a warning at once. I am not here because I love this place, she said. I am here because it is colder to run than to stay. Elias's voice came rough. You could leave, he said. If you wanted. Nokuthula looked at him as if he were a child speaking nonsense. Leave to where? She asked. To the woods? To men who will take what they want? To a town that already knows my price? Elias had no answer. Nokuthula's gaze softened by a hair's width, not pity, just clarity. You have a cabin, she said. You have a name men fear. I have strength and knowledge and a body that does not break easy. We can be a wall for each other. Elias felt his chest tighten. A wall, he repeated. Yes, she said. Not a romance. Not a story men sing. A wall. Elias stared at the open back room door. It wasn't a welcome into bed. It was a signal that she no longer needed the bolt as her first defense. He nodded once, slow. All right, he said. A wall. Nokuthula walked to the shelf and took down a small bundle of beads. She held it in her palm. These were my mother's, she said. I kept them through everything. Elias watched, careful, like the beads were fragile glass. Nokuthula held them out to him. Elias froze. I can't. You can hold them, she said. Not take. Hold. And give back. Elias stepped forward. He took the beads gently, as if his large hands might crush the history in them. The beads were cool against his skin, smooth, real. He looked up at her. Why? Nokuthula's eyes did not flinch from his. Because you spoke plain, she said. And because you fought without trying to own me through it. Elias's throat tightened. He handed them back as carefully as he'd received them. Nokuthula took them and placed them against her chest, where they belonged. The wind moaned outside. Snow tapped the window again. Elias turned toward his blanket on the floor. Habit pulled him there. But the back room door was open. Not wide. Just open. He stopped, standing between rooms like a man between worlds. Nokuthula, he said quietly. I'll sleep here. Unless you tell me otherwise. Nokuthula stood by the table, watching him. Her face was unreadable, but her shoulders eased a fraction. You will sleep where you can hear the door, she said. So if men come, you wake first. Elias nodded, understanding. It was still safety. Still a wall. He moved his blanket closer to the back room doorway, near enough that the warmth from within drifted out, and the air felt less like punishment. He lay down. The boards were still hard, but the fire was steady and the cabin felt less hollow. In the dark he heard no Cuthula move. The soft creak of the bed. The slight rustle of cloth. Then stillness. Elias stared at the ceiling, eyes open. Outside, somewhere down the slope, a man shouted and laughed. Another voice answered. Boots crunched. The night was full of the careless confidence of men who believed the world belonged to them. Elias's hands ached under their fresh wraps. He flexed them once, feeling the pull. He thought of the mare in the lean-to, strong and bright-eyed, bought with a vow that had started wrong. He thought of no Cuthula behind him, a woman no man should have been allowed to price. He understood then that the true cost of the horse was not the wedding. It was the daily choice after it. To be a wall, every day, even when it was lonely. Even when it made him look weak in the eyes of fools. Even when the cold made his temper sharp. Sleep came slower, but when it came it was deeper. He dreamed of a road cut through snow, straight and narrow. Two figures walking it side by side, not touching, not speaking, but moving with the same pace, shoulders set against the wind. Near dawn a sound snapped him awake. Not the stove. Not the wind. A footstep on the cabin's step. Elias sat up instantly, heart hammering. He listened, breath held. Another step. Then a pause, as if someone weighed whether the door would open easy. Elias rose without noise and reached for the axe handle propped near the stove. His wrapped hands made the grip clumsy, but he held it tight. He moved toward the door, bare feet silent on the boards. From the back room, no Cuthula's voice cut through the dark, calm as iron. Elias, she said low. Do not open it. Elias froze, axe in hand, listening. Outside a faint scrape. Then a whisper close to the wood. Halt, a man's voice murmured, thick with drink. Open up. Just wanna talk. Elias recognized it. Macready. His jaw tightened so hard it hurt. No Cuthula stepped into the doorway behind him. He could feel her presence without looking. A steady weight. A spine. Elias leaned close to the door, voice low and deadly calm. There ain't no talk at this hour, he said. Go home. A snort from outside. Come on. Don't be like that. We're just... Elias lifted the axe slightly so the blade caught firelight. You take one more step, Elias said, and I'll open the door to bury you. Silence. Then Macready laughed, a nervous sound that tried to pretend it wasn't afraid. You ain't gonna? From behind Elias, no Cuthula spoke, voice clear enough to carry. If you break this door, she called, you will lose more than teeth. I have broken men with kettles. I will break you with whatever is in my hand. There was a long pause. The kind where a drunk man tries to decide if he is brave or stupid. Then boots shifted on the step. Snow crunched as someone backed away. Macready muttered something Elias couldn't make out. Then the footsteps retreated down the slope, stumbling, fading into the wind. Elias kept his position until the sound vanished completely. Only then did he lower the axe. He turned slowly. No Cuthula stood near him, her face in shadow, beadwork faintly catching the dying firelight. You listened, she said. Elias nodded. His voice came out rough. I did. No Cuthula looked at him a moment longer. Then she stepped closer, not into him, not touching, but near enough that he could feel the warmth of her body in the cold air. This is the test, she said softly. Not the wedding. Not the paper. This. Elias's throat tightened. I know, he said. No Cuthula held his gaze. Then, without ceremony, she reached out and touched his wrapped hand once. A brief press. Not affection. Not surrender. Recognition. Then she withdrew and returned to the back room. Elias stood in the dim, axe in hand, listening to the wind and the settling cabin. His heart still hammered, but there was something else beneath it now. Not pride. Not victory. A hard, quiet certainty. If men came again he would not bend. And if no Cuthula watched him, measuring, he would give her something better than words. He would give her a door that stayed closed to danger, and a life that did not ask her to bolt herself away. The next day the rumor ran ahead of Elias like a winter wind. It wasn't the kind of tale men told with admiration. It was the kind they sharpened to cut you down. Macready had been turned away. Macready had been threatened. Macready had been made to feel small. And men did not forgive smallness. Elias hit the camp early, the mare's hooves steady on the packed road. His wrapped hands throbbed with every tug of leather. The cold kept the pain honest. It didn't let him forget anything. Rusk met him at the landing, jaw set, eyes like nails. Macready says you threatened to kill him, Rusk said. Elias didn't blink. Macready came to my door drunk, he replied. In the dark. That's what he did. Rusk's eyes narrowed. He says he wanted to talk. Elias nodded once. Then he should have tried daylight. A long silence passed, filled by the squeal of a saw and the clatter of chains. Rusk spit into the snow. You got trouble tied to you now. Elias kept his voice even. Trouble was there before me. Rusk watched him weighing. You keep the work moving, he said finally. I don't care what you do at home. But if men start swinging axes at each other over your marriage, I'll cut you loose. Elias's chest tightened. A man without wages was a man without winter. I won't start it, Elias said. Rusk's gaze stayed hard. Don't matter who starts it, he replied. Matters who ends it. Elias nodded. Understood. The day's haul began. The mare leaned into the collar and pulled a load of spruce logs down the skid road. Elias walked beside her, one hand on the line, boots biting into rutted snow. Men watched him, quieter now. Not respectful. Just cautious. McCready didn't speak to him. McCready spoke around him, like poison moving through a crowd. He leaned into groups, whispering with that false grin. He wanted the camp to feel like Elias had done something unnatural, something wrong. Not the bargain. Not the traitor. Not the men who stared. Only Elias. By afternoon, Elias felt eyes on his back the way he felt sleep before it hit. He kept his shoulders square and his breath steady. When the mare balked at a drifted spot, he soothed her with low words and a firm hand. He didn't lash her. He didn't yank her mouth raw. He had bought her wrong, but he would not work her wrong. He caught Lyle watching him again, the young choker setter's face still pale from yesterday's near death. Lyle shuffled closer during a lull, voice hesitant. Halt. Elias glanced over. Yeah. Lyle cleared his throat. They say you married her for the horse. Elias's jaw tightened. They say plenty. Lyle swallowed. Is it true? Elias looked at the boy. Lyle's eyes were earnest, not cruel. He reminded Elias of himself at 19 before pride became armor. Elias chose plain. Yeah, he said. It's true. Lyle blinked, surprised by the honesty. Then why you fight them talking about her? Elias held the line steady, watching the mare's ears flick. Because it's still wrong, Elias said. Lyle frowned. But you did it. Elias nodded once. I did. And I gotta live inside that. Doesn't mean I let men spit on her to feel clean. Lyle was quiet a moment. Then he nodded slowly, like something had clicked in him that wasn't comfortable. My ma says, Lyle murmured, a man ain't what he says. He's what he protects. Elias looked at him, surprised. That your ma? Elias asked. Lyle gave a small shrug. She was mean as winter, he said, almost proud. But she kept us alive. Elias felt something shift in his chest, tight and unfamiliar. Smart woman, he said. Lyle nodded and stepped back into the work. When dusk came, Elias returned home with shoulders heavy and hands burning. The mare steamed in the cold, flank damp under her thick coat. The cabin window glowed again, steady as a promise kept by someone else. Elias paused at the step. He listened. No footsteps. No voices. Only the wind and the far-off creak of trees. He knocked once, soft. The door opened before his knuckles fully fell. Nokuthula stood there, not startled, as if she had been waiting with her ear to the wood. You are whole, she said, eyes scanning him. Elias nodded. So far. She stepped back to let him in. Warmth rushed out. The smell of cornmeal and something sweet, maybe dried fruit, caught him off guard. He hung his coat and stamped snow from his boots. You cooked, he said. Nokuthula's eyes flicked to the pot. I fed us, she corrected. Elias nodded. Right. They ate together, the fire throwing slow shadows on the walls. Nokuthula spoke little, but her silence wasn't a wall now. It was a watchfulness. After supper, Elias set his bowl down. He hesitated, then spoke. McCready came to camp talking, he said. Nokuthula's gaze stayed steady. He will keep coming, she replied. He is not finished. Elias exhaled. Foreman says if there's trouble, he'll cut me loose. Nokuthula sat back slightly, considering. Then McCready does not want only to shame you, she said. He wants to starve you. Elias rubbed his wrapped hands. Seems so. Nokuthula's eyes sharpened. You cannot fight the camp alone, she said. Not with fists. Elias looked at her. What then? Nokuthula's lips pressed together. You must make your value bigger than their talk, she said. Men forgive what they fear to lose. Elias stared at the stove, thinking of Rusk, of wages, of winter. How, he asked. Nokuthula rose and went to the shelf. She pulled down a small cloth bundle and unfolded it. Inside were dried leaves, bark strips, and a lump of dark resin. Elias blinked. What's that? Medicine, Nokuthula said. For wounds. For cough. For fever. You have men here who lose fingers and breathe sawdust and rot inside their chests. Elias felt a slow understanding. You're saying? I can help them, she said simply. If they let me. Elias hesitated. They won't. Nokuthula's eyes narrowed. They will when they are desperate, she replied. Desperate men stop pretending. Elias thought of the coughs in the bunkhouse. The winter fevers that took men in 3 days. The way the camp pretended strength until it failed. He nodded slowly. If you can help, he said, I'll speak for you. Nokuthula studied him. You will not speak like you own me, she warned. Elias held her gaze. I'll speak like you're needed, he said. A faint easing in her shoulders. Good, she replied. That night, Elias slept again near the back room door. Not because she demanded it now. Because he wanted the first sound of danger to hit him before it hit her. Before dawn, a hard knock came. Elias sat up instantly. He reached for the axe, heart already pounding. Another knock. Not cautious. Not drunk. Firm. Nokuthula's voice came from the back room, calm. Put down the axe, she said. This knock has purpose. Elias froze, listening. She was right. Drunk knocks slid and fumbled. This was a man who wanted something. Elias stood and went to the door, keeping his body between it and the back room. He lifted the latch and opened it a crack. Rusk stood outside, breath smoking. His hat brim was frosted white. His face looked harder than yesterday. We got a man down, Rusk said. Bad. Elias's stomach dropped. Who? Gunnar, Rusk replied. Caught a hook. Tore him open near the ribs. He's bleeding and coughing foam. You got any? Rusk's eyes flicked past Elias into the cabin, caught on Nokuthula's silhouette in the dim. He hesitated, words slowing. I heard, she knows plants. Elias felt the moment tighten like a rope before it snaps. He turned his head slightly. Nokuthula, he called, voice steady. They need help. She stepped into the front room, beadwork glinting. She did not hurry like a servant. She moved like someone who decided. Rusk's gaze flicked over her, uncertain, then back to Elias as if asking permission without wanting to. Nokuthula answered without waiting. Bring cloth, she said. Bring clean water. Bring light. And bring me to him. Rusk blinked at her command. His pride fought it. Then he nodded once tight. All right, he muttered. Elias grabbed his coat. Nokuthula wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, not to change herself, only to keep the cold from biting her bones. She tucked her medicine bundle into her belt. They followed Rusk down the slope into the camp. Men stepped aside as they passed. Eyes widened. Whispers rose. Look at that. What's she doing here? Rusk brought her. Elias kept his face hard. Nokuthula kept hers calm. They reached the bunkhouse where Gunnar lay. The air inside was thick with sweat and fear. Men crowded the doorway, faces pale in lantern light. Gunnar was a big Swede, broad as a door, now curled like a child. His shirt was soaked dark. His breath rattled wet. A camp doctor wasn't much more than a drunk with a saw. The only man who claimed the title stood back, hands shaking. I can't get it to stop, the doctor muttered. Nokuthula pushed forward. Men parted, hesitant, as if her presence carried heat they didn't understand. She knelt by Gunnar, eyes sharp. She pressed fingers near the wound, not afraid of blood. Gunnar groaned, eyes rolling. Hold him, Nokuthula said. 2 men hesitated. Elias stepped in, voice like a whip. Hold him, he repeated. They obeyed. Nokuthula worked fast. She cleaned the wound with hot water. She packed it with resin and crushed bark, pressing firm, controlled. She tore cloth into strips and wrapped his ribs tight, binding him like a log on a sled. Gunnar's breath came hard. He coughed and blood flecked his lips. Nokuthula leaned close, speaking to him in a low voice Elias didn't understand. The sound was steady like prayer without church. Gunnar's eyes found her. He blinked. His breathing eased by a fraction. The men watched, stunned. When she finished, Nokuthula stood, hands stained dark. He will live if you keep him warm, she said. If you keep him still. If you do not feed him whiskey like a fool. The doctor bristled. Nokuthula cut him off with a look. If he drinks, she said, he will bleed again. Rusk swallowed, face tight. We'll keep him, he said. Nokuthula nodded. Then she turned and walked out, not waiting for thanks. Outside, the cold air hit them. The camp stood in a hush, men watching her as if seeing a new shape in the world. Elias felt the weight of it. The wall was changing. It wasn't just his fists now. It was usefulness. It was necessity. As they climbed back toward the cabin, Rusk walked beside Elias, boots crunching. "She saved him," Rusk said quietly. Elias nodded. "Yeah." Rusk's jaw worked. Pride still sat in him like a stone. "Camp owes her," he admitted, voice tight. Elias glanced at him. "Camp owes more than her," he said. "Camp owes her respect." Rusk didn't answer right away. Then he nodded once, small and begrudging. "I'll speak," Rusk said. "But men don't change quick." Elias looked ahead at Nokuthula walking in the snow, back straight, shoulders steady. "I ain't asking quick," Elias replied. "I'm asking true." They reached the cabin. Nokuthula went inside first. Elias followed, closing the door behind them. For a moment she leaned against the wall, breath slow. The work had cost her. Elias watched her hands, stained and chapped. "You did good," he said softly. Nokuthula's eyes lifted. "I did what I know," she replied. "Now you do what you know." Elias nodded, understanding. But even as warmth filled the cabin again, he felt the dark edge of the day. MacCready had watched too. Elias had seen him at the bunkhouse doorway, eyes narrowed, mouth tight. A man who wanted control would not tolerate a shift in power. Elias understood then that saving Gunnar might not soften the camp the way Nokuthula hoped. It might only make the wrong men feel threatened. And threatened men did not simply talk. They planned. If you enjoyed, please subscribe and comment what country you're watching from. See you in the next one.